This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Unprecedented World Health Assembly convenes online as the coronavirus pandemic takes its toll on countries. Over 86,000 coronavirus cases reported across Africa. An armed group kills 20 villagers in northeast Congo. Hello and thank you for joining us here on Africa Live, here on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up over the next hour. In business, Kenyan-based East African Breweries issues a profit warning. And in sports, Ivorian football supporters adjust to life without their favorite game. The World Health Organization will soon kick off its first ever virtual assembly. Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to deliver a speech at the opening ceremony via video link. The 73rd session of the World Health Assembly has been reduced to fit into 2 days and is expected, not surprisingly, to focus on COVID-19. Well, the World Health Assembly's annual oversight convention begins today as the world continues to fight the pandemic. For the first time, the assembly will be held online. CGTN's Rahul Pathak has more.
COVID-19, the greatest health crisis the world has faced in over a century. The world's response to that crisis will be the main topic at the 73rd World Health Assembly starting on Monday. Normally, WHO members would meet at the World Health Organization's headquarters in Geneva. This year, however, the entire gathering will take place virtually in accordance with social distancing guidelines.
This is unprecedented, and it's certainly part of learning to live in the new world we're all learning to live in with COVID-19. This meeting is being truncated to 2 days and is being held entirely virtually. So everything will happen online.
This will be the first gathering of the WHO since the coronavirus outbreak began, and the WHO has been eager to show how important it has been in leading the global response. Countries including the United States have requested the WHO invite Chinese Taipei as an observer and are pushing for discussions about the proposal at the World Health Assembly. China have opposed that, calling it political maneuvering. Also on the agenda will be the ongoing global search for a vaccine, with many member states starting trials on possible vaccine candidates. However, many experts doubt a cure for COVID-19 will be developed within a year. Well, vaccine or no vaccine, countries around the world, including here in Spain, have started easing their lockdown restrictions in a bid to get their economies moving again. But the question for the WHO delegates this week will be how to balance that against the threat of COVID-19 spreading further. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
Right now, for more on this story, we're joined by CGTN's Julia Lyubova in Geneva and Daniel Arap-Moi, who joins me live here in studio. Julia, I'll begin with you. The World Health Assembly meeting kicks off today in Geneva. What is the agenda of the WHO's decision-making body?
Well, this year's World Health Assembly comes at an unprecedented time. Of course, it comes at a time when the world is battling the COVID-19 pandemic, which has already claimed thousands of lives around the world and has plunged the world economy into a recession. Well, and normally the representatives from 194 member states would be meeting in Geneva. But of course, as you mentioned, this assembly is actually taking place online, and it has been reduced to just 2 days instead of the normal week or so that it normally takes place. And of course, the main focus for this year's World Health Assembly will be finding a vaccination for the new coronavirus. And of course, most of the agenda will be related to the COVID-19 pandemic.
And Daniel Arap-Moi is with me here in studio. Daniel, just how important is the World Health Assembly to the African continent?
Well, thank you very much. This assembly, of course, is the decision-making body of the World Health Organization as we know it. And it's being attended by all the 194 members of the United Nations. Now, this is a meeting that we rarely speak about. It's not really known to so many people, but it comes at a time when the coronavirus is ravaging the world, and including Africa as the continent itself. And we do think that this assembly is going to look at, well, first of all, there's already an agenda that is on the table. And there is what we call the African group. The African group is going to be interested in knowing what other member countries have pushed for. They want to discuss the question of the origin of the virus itself. So the African group will be interested in knowing that as well, including many other countries across the world. But also the African continent will be looking at learning lessons from countries that have effectively fought this virus in trying to contain it. For instance, China, that has tried its level best to make sure that the virus is contained in a larger perspective. So Africa will be looking at learning lessons from how China managed to do this through the World Health Organization, of course. So we will be so much looking into that. Now, another critical element that I think Africa as a continent will be looking at is the question of the vaccine. We do believe that this assembly will discuss the question of the vaccine. Many countries are trying out to come up with a cure. And Africa as a continent has also tried to come up with a local hub. Madagascar, well, for instance, we've seen many other African countries have rallied behind Madagascar in trying to buy the local hub. So the question of vaccine is going to be one of the key issues that African group will be looking at during this assembly.
All right, Julia, coming back to you in Geneva, what is the rationale for the proposal of an inquiry into the origins of COVID-19, and which countries are behind that?
Yes, that's right. So one of the main issues on the agenda will be a draft resolution that's been pushed by the European Union and Australia. Well, this resolution calls for an investigation into the origins of COVID-19, and more than 120 countries have backed this draft resolution already. Well, this resolution calls for an end to international blame game and also the responses by countries taken to this pandemic. And so this resolution calls for unity and solidarity around the world. And of course, while finding the origins of COVID-19 to try to find, there are no mechanisms, but of course, they will try to investigate just how it started and to hopefully learn some lessons from this. But at the same time, they would also try to make sure that the health community around the world works closely together to ensure worldwide access to a vaccination for COVID-19 and of course to medicate for this as well.
Right, and Daniel, coming back to you now, what role can you tell us has the WHO played in helping Africa combat viruses here on the continent, and have those projects been successful?
Well, thank you very much. The World Health Organization has been on the forefront when it comes to fighting viruses in Africa. And of course, one of the areas that we can point out vividly is the question of Ebola outbreak in the first place. We saw from West Africa to Central Africa, the World Health Organization has been a key player when it comes to fighting the Ebola virus. And also, the World Health Organization has been a key player in trying to help Africa combat measles, diarrhea, and in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they played a key role in trying to contain not just the Ebola virus itself, but also COVID-19. Now, the WHO was supposed to declare DRC Ebola-free, but unfortunately, the virus wasn't gone yet. But also, another area that we've seen World Health Organization playing a key role in Africa is the question of the pandemic itself, which is the COVID-19. The World Health Organization has been in position to train Africa's healthcare workers. They have donated kits to several African countries as one of the ways of trying to help Africa contain the spread of this virus. So the body has played a key role, I must say. And it is very unfortunate that there are countries that have kicked out members of this body, you know, from their respective countries. That is very dangerous when it comes to issues of viruses, you know. So this is a body that has played a key role, and they continue to play a key role as far as COVID-19 is concerned. So we must give WHO a credit as Africa.
All right. And finally, Julia, Just tell us, how has the WHO been able to help Europe fight COVID-19, and what do you expect out of the WHO meeting?
Well, the World Health Organization has been leading the global response to this COVID-19 pandemic. It has been advising governments around the world. It has been issuing guidelines and recommendations on how to best handle this pandemic. And of course, this World Health Assembly comes at a time when the United States said that it would withdraw its funding from the World Health Organization. So, of course, it comes at a very difficult time for this organization. Of course, it received some criticism of its handling of the pandemic, and this is also likely to be discussed at this assembly. And so all of those issues are likely to come up as well. But of course, despite of this, the World Health Organization, and as well as other major member states, they all call for unity to fight this pandemic, and that the unity to fight this pandemic and to find solutions, to find vaccinations which will be accessible to everybody around the world, that would be the main resolution that the member states will be hoping to arrive at towards the end of this World Health Assembly.
All right, thank you both for your insights into that. Julia Lyubova joining us live there from Geneva, and Daniel Arap Moi speaking to us live here in studio. Now, Africa, like the rest of the world, continues to battle the COVID-19 pandemic. Over 86,000 cases have been confirmed, with around 33,500 recoveries recorded. The continent's death toll currently stands at over 2,000. As several countries across the continent start easing restrictions, the WHO has warned that authorities need to consider the ability to test and trace before lifting lockdown measures. So far, the continent has carried out over 1 million tests. Let's now take a closer look at the latest updates across Africa. Sudan has recorded over 300 new cases and 8 deaths. Health officials in the country enforced a nationwide lockdown on May the 1st. Travel in and out of the capital, Khartoum, has also been banned. Meanwhile, the island nation of Madagascar has recorded its first death, a 57-year-old hospital car park attendant. In Malawi, experts are sounding the alarm as presidential candidates hit the campaign trail. Health experts are warning the large campaign rallies could result in an increase of cases. Well, let's turn to Tanzania now, where President John Magufuli says the number of COVID-19 cases in the country has gone down enough to start to bring life back to a semblance of normalcy. Speaking during a Sunday church service in his hometown of Chato, the president said he is considering the reopening of schools and even allowing sports in the country to resume.
President Magufuli used a church visit to express optimism that life in Tanzania may soon return to normal. He says the number of COVID-19 cases in the country has dropped significantly, and as a result, he is considering the reopening of schools and even allowing sports in the country to resume.
If the week beginning tomorrow will continue like this, I have planned to open up colleges so that our students can continue studying.
Having halted the release of updates on COVID-19 cases pending an investigation into the working of the National Laboratory, Magufuli said a special commission that was formed to look into the matter is expected to announce its findings soon. Critics say Tanzania has not responded as strongly to the pandemic as some of its neighbors, while acknowledging that each country has its own way of dealing with the crisis. Like many of its neighbors, Tanzania has not imposed lockdowns or curfews. But the president was quick to point out why Tanzania had no plans to close its borders.
And that is why I did not close our borders. I respected my neighbours. Around 8 countries surround us. If you lock them out, it means you have locked their economic means. There are some countries that depend on food from Tanzania.
The president also used the occasion to welcome news of airlines that have already begun booking tourists to come to Tanzania in the near future. Additionally, he has designated 3 days, starting Friday the 22nd May, for National Thanksgiving for the drop in the number of COVID-19 patients in the country. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Let's turn to Algeria now, where Chinese medical experts visited the country's health ministry on Sunday to hold in-depth talks with officials and public health experts there. CGTN's He Weiwei has more.
A welcome from Algeria. Officials from the health ministry meet with the Chinese 20-person medical team.
China has regularly sent medical teams to Algeria since 1963. This time the two countries send their donations to each other to combat the COVID-19. This strengthens our long-term friendship.
As of now, China has sent over 3,000 medical staff to work in Algeria.
The Chinese experts were then invited for a visit to the country's crisis unit for the pandemic.
This is the inspection center of the COVID-19 in Algeria. It's something like a brain of the country's national emergency response mechanism. And on the walls, we can see a lot of paper pasted here. Let's take a close look at this paper. For example, we can see that this is the information of April 30, and all these are the 48 provinces in Algeria. And the numbers, this is the number of hospitals in this province, suspected cases of the COVID-19, confirmed cases, and remaining beds vacancy. And these are some other information of the ICU. This is really very clear.
The crisis unit was set up on February the 22nd. About 40 experts have been working 24 hours per day since then to help combat COVID-19. Each of the experts on duty will be in charge of monitoring 4 or 5 provinces.
The medical team then held talks with Algerian experts on various issues related to containing the virus.
Because this is not like short-term emergency, it's kind of protracted. It's become long-term. It's change our strategy from short-term to long-term.
Similar communications will be held in the coming days. He Weiwei, CGTN, Algiers.
Now, as Zimbabwe continues to enforce a nationwide lockdown, those working in the informal sector are calling for urgent help. They are warning that food is running out as the lockdown has stopped them from working. On Saturday, President Emmerson Mnangagwa extended the movement restrictions indefinitely. CGTN's Mahia Mutua has more.
Though more sectors of the economy have been progressively reopened, the informal sector, which accounts for the majority of economic activity here, remains shut down. Those who rely on it for a living are getting desperate.
I do not know what to do anymore because I have 4 children and I have nothing to feed them. Today all I fed my baby is porridge which I cooked using a mealie meal I got from my neighbor.
It's been hours since that meal and she thinks her baby is crying again because of hunger. A commuter taxi driver who's been grounded during the lockdown tells me he's going to sell his mobile phone so he can buy food for his family.
I have been going around to friends asking for help, anything, even a plate of meal or some vegetables, because I have nothing left.
The situation for many people here has been made worse by soaring inflation that has quickened the depletion of what little cash reserves they had.
Kilian Chijande is on a list of vulnerable people who are receiving cash transfers from the government. Kilian says he's received the equivalent of $16, which he says is not enough.
I received $415, but I only managed to buy a packet of macaroni. I have about $100 left, and that will only buy a bag of subsidized mealie meal.
With the lockdown extended indefinitely, there are fears some may not recover.
Those in business have spent their profits and their capital, so they won't be able to reopen when this is over.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa has said the coronavirus restrictions will be reviewed every fortnight and additional measures may be introduced if the number of cases increases. So far, Zimbabwe has a low number of infections compared to other African countries, a statistic many hope is maintained so they can be allowed to return to work and provide for their families. Mahia Mutua, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Now, as the coronavirus pandemic continues to take its toll, many African countries have ordered consignments of the COVID organics herbal remedy from Madagascar. The World Health Organization has warned there is no proof that the herbal mixture can treat the disease. But in Tunisia, people are flocking to buy other herbal medicines, which they believe will boost their immunity. Adnan Shawashi has the details from Tunis.
Haj Mohammed is one of the longest serving herbalists at Souk al-Blat market in the old Medina of Tunis. All shops here are over a century old. He has been working in the same street for the past 57 years, selling medicinal herbs to people from all walks of life. Since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, many shoppers have come here looking for a miracle cure.
People are free to look for the cure they want, whether they visit the doctor or come shopping here. I never give any medicinal herbs to patients who do not have X-ray and blood test results. I always view the doctor's diagnosis. Protecting people's lives is a responsibility.
Sadaq Omrani is a third-generation owner of 3 stalls selling herbal products. The 70-year-old man is an expert in traditional herbal medicine. He does not fear shaking hands, even during the pandemic. Sadaq does not believe in the purported herbal cure for COVID-19, while some clients say the mix could save lives.
Medicinal herbs are very good for immunity, but coronavirus is still an enigma. I've heard about the purported cure, but I cannot comment on its efficiency.
I think this purported African cure for COVID-19 could work. Why not? The cure could be natural, cheap, and available at similar markets.
Tunisian pharmacists insist that the COVID-19 task force will not accept the distribution of any unconventional cure without the approval of the National Scientific Committee.
It is unacceptable to claim that the so-called herbal cure is a solution without scientific evidence and research. The coronavirus is not yet understood by scientists and epidemiologists. The vaccine or cure should come from the pharmaceutical industry and laboratories instead of herbal stores.
Tunisians acknowledge the importance of herbal medicines, which are valued for warding off winter flu. People here use herbs to boost their immune systems rather than for curing COVID-19. Experts say that human trials with an experimental COVID-19 vaccine have already begun in many countries. Tunisian virologists at the National Observatory of New and Emerging Diseases have urged citizens to go to the hospital and to avoid using any herbal cure if they have coronavirus symptoms. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The United States has reported nearly 1.5 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. Yet, almost all states are starting to ease restrictions despite warnings from the nation's top health agency. Toby Muse has more.
The US is taking steps to slowly reopen its economy, but at different paces across the country. We're seeing in Republican areas a push to open up the economy at a quicker pace. Democratic regions, which include most of the major urban centers such as Washington, D.C., Los Angeles and New York, are urging more caution. 36 million Americans have submitted unemployment claims since mid-March. Many of them want to get back to work. The potential rewards and risks of reopening too soon can be seen perhaps in Texas. Texas began reopening at the beginning of the month. Now, as the local economy has reactivated, the state is also seeing a rise in confirmed cases of COVID-19. It's not clear if that is because of increased testing. The more testing carried out, the more positive results will be found. The Trump administration says the government is committed to reopening the economy with or without a vaccine.
What the president was making the point on is everything does not depend on a vaccine. We're committed to delivering a vaccine. We're going to put the full power of the U.S. government and our private sector towards getting to a vaccine. But that's one part of a multifactorial response program.
This comes as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, estimates 100,000 Americans will die by June the 1st. Former President Barack Obama has criticized President Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19 crisis.
More than anything, this pandemic has finally torn back the curtain on the idea that so many of the folks in charge know what they're doing. A lot of them aren't even pretending to be in charge. If the world's going to get better, it's going to be up to you. With everything suddenly feeling like it's up for grabs, this is your time to seize the initiative.
There is a tradition in American politics of former presidents not criticizing the incumbent of the White House. Yet President Trump has spent much of his time in the Oval Office criticizing the administration of former President Barack Obama. The latest series of attacks by President Trump against Obama is something he's trying to call Obamagate, where he claims members of Obama's administration authorized illegal spying on members of President Trump's incoming administration back in 2016, in 2017. This has been denied by Obama officials. Toby Muse, CGTN, Washington.
Brazil has surged past Spain and Italy with the fourth highest COVID-19 cases in the world. Over 240,000 people have been infected. The vice president is under quarantine after a public servant who had been near him tested positive. Still, President Jair Bolsonaro is calling for an end to large-scale isolation and the start of reopening the economy. And still ahead on this newscast. Armed group kills 20 villagers in northeast Congo. And Burundi set to go to the polls as political parties wrap up their campaigns.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now at least 20 civilians have been killed in the DRC's Ituri province. Codeco, a Lendu militia group, carried out an attack on a Hema village. Intercommunal violence has forced around 200,000 people out of their homes in the past 2 months. UN peacekeepers were able to chase attackers from the village of Njala. At least 14 civilians were also injured in the attack. Meanwhile, Burundi's main opposition leader and presidential candidate Agathon Rwasa has staged a final rally. Rwasa has promised residents equal job opportunities for all and to end totalitarianism. The East African nation will be holding its first competitive presidential election on Wednesday since a civil war erupted in 1993. Simmering political violence and fears that campaign rallies could accelerate the spread of the coronavirus have already marred campaigning. Incumbent President Pierre Nkurunziza is stepping down after 15 years in office. This week, his government expelled the representative of the World Health Organization in Burundi, despite mounting fears that election rallies could help spread the new coronavirus.
I will vote for the CNL party because it's a political party which fights against torture, theft, and all those who attack us daily.
For Burundians to gain freedom, they must elect leaders who can meet their expectations. That makes elections necessary.
And still on that story, Burundi is set to hold presidential, legislative, and municipal elections on May the 20th. As final rallies come to a close, CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy looks at the profile of Burundi's two main contenders.
7 candidates have registered for the presidential elections in Burundi, but the country's ruling party, the National Council for the Defense of Democracy, Forces for the Defense of Democracy, is rallying behind Evariste Ndayishimiye. Being an ally of Pierre Nkurunziza and Burundi's ruling party's Secretary General, 52-year-old Evariste Ndayishimiye is widely seen as a possible successor to Nkurunziza. Ndayishimiye, also head of the Department of Military Affairs in the President's office, has served as Burundi's Minister of the Interior and Security. As his #1 priority, Ndayishimiye has promised to create an environment for peace and healing following years of unrest. He has also promised to tackle rampant corruption and removing barriers to young people's involvement in national political and development discourse. He is also promising to develop the agricultural sector. Ndayishimiye's foremost opponent is the leader of opposition party, National Freedom Council's candidate Agathon Rwasa. Rwasa is the deputy chairman of the National Assembly. A former rebel leader and longtime political opponent of outgoing President Pierre Nkurunziza, Rwasa, who is 56, was the leading opposition candidate in 2 previous elections in 2010 and 2015, which he boycotted. He later assumed the leadership of a coalition of independent groups, Amazero y'Abarundi, which became the second biggest political force in the country after the 2015 disputed elections. Rwasa went ahead to create a new party, the CNL, to comply with the constitution amended in 2018, which banned coalitions of independents. Rwasa has promised to build a Burundi for all by eradicating political intolerance. Other presidential contenders include Domitien Ndayizeye, who was the transitional president between 2003 and 2005, as Burundians sought to embrace democracy after a military rule by 2-time former President General Pierre Buyoya. Ndayizeye now heads the Kira Burundi coalition. There is also Diodone Naimana, independent, Francis Rohero, independent, Gaston Sindimo, Union for National Progress, and Leonce Ngendahumana, holding it for the Front for Democracy in Burundi. A candidate winning more than 50% in the first round of voting takes the presidency in Burundi, where approximately 5 million of the population of 12 million are expected to vote. Burundi has enjoyed a long stint of calm for over 10 years until the last presidential election that proved to be controversial. President Pierre Nkurunziza was accused by opposition groups for seeking a 3rd term unconstitutionally. However, Nkurunziza claimed his first term followed his appointment by parliament, but not through the ballot. The country had also strained ties with the neighboring Rwanda. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN.
Heading west now, where the UN mission to Mali held a ceremony for 4 deceased Chadian soldiers. The soldiers' convoy was attacked in the country's north during a routine patrol. At least 3 other soldiers were also seriously wounded. CGTN's Asta Tal with more.
The bodies of Chadian peacekeepers now lay on the shoulders of their comrades. On May 10th, a roadside bomb exploded, killing them in Mali's Kidal region.
Brave and valiant soldiers in an international mission defending the virtues and values of the United Nations. You have fallen for a just cause and in the service of peace. By this supreme act, you have shown national and international community that terrorism is not the prerogative of any one nation, let alone a generation. It is a global threat that deserves an adequate and appropriate response.
The UN peacekeeping mission in Mali has around 13,000 deployed troops. The troops are fighting a growing militant threat. MINUSMA is considered the world's most dangerous peacekeeping mission.
Those atrocities against MINUSMA will not go unpunished. We are repeatedly under cowardly attack. Although the road to peace is undermined, we will continue. I assure you of our determination to continue our mission. I remain confident that we will defeat terrorism together with our partners.
Terrorist attacks have displaced around 200,000 Malians. UN peacekeepers continue to risk their lives in an effort to bring peace to the country. The fight, however, comes with a heavy price.
Here, I would like to address or convey my deepest sympathy and condolences on behalf of the entire United Nations family.
Indeed, as they lay their comrades to rest, the troops continue to fight against the country's militant threat. Asta Tal, CGTN.
And here's what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenyan-based East African Breweries issues a profit warning. And the world's third largest economy falls into recession.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered.